Can you speak a little bit about why voter turnout is an issue? Specifically, it's always seems to be focused on the younger generations.
Yeah, voter turnout in the United States has fluctuated. We long think about ourselves as a democracy in which everybody enjoys the right to vote, and yet we know that not everybody exercises that right to vote, even those people who are able to. Voters tend to be, you don't have to be, in the upper socioeconomic status. So upper SESs tend to vote. Those in the lower socioeconomic status tend not to vote. And that's another reason that young people don't vote in as large numbers as older people, because obviously they don't have as much education yet. They may not have as much wealth yet. I think there are things we can do to change that. But again, it's going to take a concerted effort. And one of the things that's required is when you're in an election campaign like we are this year, you have to talk about sort of dry and boring things like election law, campaign finance reform, how we conduct elections. So we have to combat all of those sort of structural challenges, even to have the conversation, which could lead to the sort of change that might increase turnout. We shouldn't make it hard for young people to vote. We should make it easier. And we don't do that particularly well. Some states do a better job than others, and I think we're moving in that direction. And fascinatingly, the pandemic, I think, will help us in terms of the absentee ballots and mail ballots and things, but it's still a struggle.
Are there certain issues that have come up during this election, or maybe even over the last couple of years, that really were never discussed previously, but also maybe issues that are probably going to be, issues that we'll see in future elections?
Yeah, I think we've been so inundated in this cycle by huge issues, the issue of the pandemic and healthcare. We haven't had a pandemic in this country, thankfully, since the early 1900s. I think the issue of policing, social unrest, treatment of groups in our country, I think that is something that obviously we've talked about, and rightly so, from the founding, and we need to do a better job addressing. So I think those issues, the focus on the Supreme Court and the federal judiciary and the future of the court and what that future should look like, is something that is going to be addressed. It has been one of those years in which so many issues have come up that are so important, and yet the electorate has been remarkably stable in terms of its views and its attitudes. So there's sort of an irony there that we see.
Yeah, one issue that I think has been discussed, but really not as much in the political landscape, has been, the data privacy and the social media networks. Do you see that becoming a conversation before Election Day, or do you think that's something that's on the back burner and is going to be on the forefront in the future? Because I do think that's something that's concerning, all, ages, all age groups.
I'm so glad you brought that up because it's such an important issue. And I think we have seen it come up. We've seen hearings in Congress, as you well know. We've heard both sides of the political aisle talk about it. We don't have that much time before the election. I don't know that we're going to have a huge, concerted, robust conversation like we should. But I do think that the government is going to have to address some of these issues. One of the interesting things about getting new people, younger people in government elected and appointed and in the bureaucracy is we will at some point have a generation of people who grew up with this technology in a way we don't. We are going to see sort of a generational transition, which I think will make it more likely we address those issues going forward, but they desperately have to be addressed because they impact every aspect of our lives.
Do you think that this year, based on your coverage, do you think that we're going to see more young people getting out to vote just because there's so much going on?
I think so. 2014, the midterm of 2014, was a particularly low turnout for young people. If I remember correctly, I think it was under 20% of young people turned out to vote in 2014. But we've seen that increase, and we saw it increase in 2016 a little bit. We saw certainly an increase in the midterm of 2018. And I suspect and hope that young people are energized and animated to go out and vote in this election cycle.